Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Film for Fans podcast, your home for movie news, reviews, and movie fan views. This is the podcast from movie fans for movie fans. I am your host, Ryan Dunlevy, and joined once again by my co-host, Rob Dunham.
How you doing?
All right. Well, we have got an excellent show in store for you. If you like the Film for Fans podcast, go ahead and share it with your friends. Things are always better with friends, aren't they, Rob?
I agree.
They're just better with friends, and so are podcasts. So share the podcast with your friends. If you do, you too can experience your life in Imax.
Wow, that sounds pretty widescreen.
Yes.
I like it.
Side note, disclaimer, claims made on this show are not binding.
Yeah, so if you don't see IMAX cameras following you around, that's the reason.
Yeah.
Sometimes we make stuff up.
We do. It happens from time to time. Okay, we've got a fantastic show for you. We're going to talk about a lot of box office stuff today. We're talking about In the Heights. We're talking about Black Widow. We're talking about Jurassic World Dominion getting a special intro upcoming here. And we will revisit the Goldfinch, talk about MCU villains, and break down our watch list. Rob, are you ready to get started?
I am ready.
Okay. Well, our first story for today involves one of the movies that's debuting this weekend, and that is In the Heights. This is the Lin-Manuel Miranda musical that's getting its movie treatment, being directed by John Chu, who directed Crazy Rich Asians. And the interesting thing about this movie was Fandango conducted a poll of 1,300 people. And as part of this poll, there was a huge portion of them who said that this would actually be the movie that brings them back to theaters. In fact, I think it was 96% will say this is the movie they're planning on seeing for the first time since the pandemic started. That seems like a really high number, but that bodes quite well for the In the Heights movie. What do you make of this being the movie that potentially brings people back?
Yeah, I'm wondering if they went down and polled like people all in the one block span of Broadway.
Exactly.
I would be very interested to see like who exactly they polled for this because, like you said, the number is very high. But I also do think that In the Heights has an option to be that kind of movie that brings a lot of people together and brings people out who might not necessarily have wanted to go see something else. So I think there's certainly potential. Like the article said, they're expecting 10 to mid tens kind of millions opening. And I could certainly see that happening with this movie. I do think Lin-Manuel Miranda is an established name at this point. So I think you also might get some people who will come just to check that out because his name is attached to it. And I think there are a lot of people also who are excited to see it because they knew about it before. So I think it has the possibility to play to a fairly broad audience. So we'll see what it actually ends up doing.
Yeah, I would think that would be your last point. I think is a good one in that this might be the first movie to come out that will have a broader appeal, that will reach I would say fan bases that are not diehards in one way, shape, or form. That aren't like action fans or horror fans or something, but that will bring the average person out to the theater. I think there's a chance of it. I'm a little surprised by it because I think in general, some musicals take off and do super, super well in the theaters, but not all of them. It is a bit of a genre that you either like it or don't. So the numbers do surprise me. But if it does work out that this is what brings people back into theaters, I think we will see that in its box office numbers. So there was some other things from the survey. I thought one of the other interesting ones was 95% are looking for a feel-good movie and escapism at the movie theater. I think that makes absolute sense. And 90% of people have seen Crazy Rich Asians. So it will be interesting to see if that is actually a pull, or if they're actually like, oh, I like that director, I'll go see this, or if it's just pulling from the same people who saw Crazy Rich Asians.
Yeah.
So yeah, interesting. That one comes out in theaters starting this weekend. So if you are into In the Heights, if you like musicals, if you like Lin-Manuel Miranda, this could be your cup of tea. It also does debut on HBO Max as well. So if you're not going to the theaters and you have HBO Max, you can see it that way too. All right, let's move on to number 2, which is Black Widow is getting expanded aspect ratio. This is another theater related story. And this is where we get a little bit technical on the IMAX side of it. So Black Widow is going to have a number of scenes, about 22 minutes of selected scenes throughout the film are getting an expanded aspect ratio for IMAX. Now, if you're not super familiar with aspect ratio, basically the idea there is it's the width of the screen versus the height, the width of it versus the height. That's what an aspect ratio is. And what you get with IMAX, since they are bigger, wider screens, is you have the opportunity, the option to get more breadth within the screen. You have more opportunity to do that. A lot of films that end up in IMAX are not necessarily shot with IMAX cameras, and they are then converted to work on IMAX. And it becomes a thing when someone actually uses IMAX cameras. This is one thing that Christopher Nolan is famous for, is extensively using IMAX cameras. What this means in practice is it means that about 22 minutes of the film are going to you'll see about 26% more. That's what it basically works out to. Going with an aspect ratio of 1.9 to 1. Which will be interesting. And now, of course, it's not the whole film, but you will see bigger, broader things, which gives you a much more immersive experience. Rob, what do you think about it?
I believe that we saw a lot of this with The Dark Knight when that came out, if I recall correctly. There were scenes, like, especially in the city. I remember when in Hong Kong, when they flew the helicopter in, a whole bunch of different places, they used this kind of effect. And when you're doing like an expansive setting like that, it's really quite something. Definitely gives you the feel that you're some other kind of movie theater, not just a regular movie theater. And I remember being very moved by it in that movie, so I'm sure it'll be the same with this.
Yeah, I think this is one of the downsides of what we have seen with IMAX. We've seen an increase in IMAX screens. We haven't seen nearly as much use of the IMAX cameras and getting some of those wider aspect ratios. So you're not getting truly the full IMAX experience on a lot of the movies you see in IMAX. So whenever you get extended portions of things shot with IMAX cameras and done with a wider aspect ratio, it really, really does show up and make a difference. Part of what the article was saying is that the IMAX company, in addition to working really well with Marvel over the years, is working on ways to get their cameras to be more user-friendly. And I think that would be a huge step forward, both for IMAX and for the movie industry, if more things can get actually shot with IMAX cameras.
Mm-hmm.
So we can be looking forward to going to see Black Widow in IMAX to see the extra aspect ratio on July 9th. Not too long from now, less than a month now. All right, and our last one is a special little teaser that came up this past week. It was announced that Jurassic World Dominion will get a preview exclusively on F9, the new Fast and Furious, on the IMAX screen. So we're going right back to IMAX. So it looks like Universal is going to be debuting a 5-minute preview of Jurassic World Dominion to open before the F9 shows in IMAX, which opens June 25th. And what's interesting about the 5-minute preview is that it will be the prologue set 65 million years ago. And apparently we're going to get to see the original mosquito biting a dinosaur, which is cool. So it goes back to 65 million years ago, and we're going to get a preview of that. It's interesting because this was a tactic that was widely done previously, but has been something that's been a little underused. I know that I think the Star Trek, the original the new version of Star Trek, the first movie, did a similar 5-minute preview before The Hobbit. That was one I can remember, but it's cool. It gives you a little extra incentive.
They did one for Ant-Man too. I don't remember which movie it was before, but Ant-Man did the same thing.
Yeah. And it's nice because you get an extended, it's not just a trailer, it's an extended scene. It's like a whole 5-minute scene. So that is something really interesting. What do you make of it, Rob?
I really like when they do this with movies, like you had said previously. Star Trek, and I think it was Star Trek Into the Darkness, if I remember right. Did this,
yeah,
and
it was Into the Darkness. Yeah,
so did Ant-Man. It is nice to see like a little full beginning of a movie to whet your appetite for what's coming next. And I think that pairing it with Fast and the Furious is Fast 9 is a good move on their part, because I think there's a lot of overlap between those audiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they also mentioned that they did one previously prior to the pandemic with Birds of Prey during an opening for It Chapter 2. So that was one that they did recently. But this is a little bit of an old school tactic, and I like it. I think it also continues to signify that people are trying to give you incentives to go back to theaters. And unfortunately, this movie, Jurassic World Dominion, does not come out until summer of 2022. So we're almost exactly a year away from Jurassic World Dominion, which, I mean, you know, they're going to tease us all, and then we got to wait a year to see the film. I mean, that's a
the
little
actual
bit
dinosaurs
cool.
are going to be roaming the earth before we get to it.
Yeah, for real. But this is fun. I think anytime you get sort of this fun kind of aspect, it just makes the film and the theater experience that much better. And I remember for Star Trek Into Darkness, I was almost as excited to see that clip as I was to go see the Hobbit movie. So it really does make a difference. And that just leads us to our kind of final little segment. What's coming out in theaters this week? There's really only two of note, and that's In the Heights, which we've already talked about, and Peter Rabbit 2. So, Rob, are you going to see either one of them?
I'm probably going to see In the Heights because I really like Lin-Manuel Miranda and I like musicals. So I think I'm starting to go to 2 movies every Wednesday. So I think that's going to be one of my ones next week.
Okay.
To go check out.
I'm not sure if I will or not. My wife might want to see In the Heights. Maybe I would go see that with her. So we'll see. I don't know.
And I'm sure I'll see Peter Rabbit with my children at some point, whether it's in the theater or not. I can't say.
Yeah, you're likely to go down that road at some point. Did you see the first one?
I did, and I did see that one in the theater. It was good.
Yeah,
it was pretty quality. Rachel McAdams and Domhnall Gleeson, however you pronounce his name, are the 2 main characters in the movie, and obviously besides computer animated Peter Rabbit. and it did have some very funny parts throughout it with the animals involved. So yeah, it was a good family movie to watch. Peter Rabbit's kind of a sarcastic jerk. James Corden is the person who plays him or does his voice. So, and not anything less than you would expect from him being the voice actor.
No doubt. All right, so let's move on to our discussion topics, not tactics. Topics. Topics is the right word. Either or, whatever. So I brought this one back up. We are going to revisit a discussion we had a while ago on a podcast about the Goldfinch. And this may seem like it's coming out of nowhere because I didn't actually watch the Goldfinch this week. However, I was reading something and all of a sudden this film popped into my head and I started analyzing this film in a new light. When I watched The Goldfinch, which was a movie that came out in 2019, based on the novel, The Goldfinch, the best-selling novel. When I watched it, I liked the movie. I always felt like there was something to it that I wasn't quite getting. Like I liked it. I felt like there was something there, but I wasn't quite experiencing it in its fullness. So, Rob, I want to throw these ideas out to you and get your thoughts on this because we've both seen this movie. I think we've both seen it more than once.
Yes, I've probably seen it 4 or 5 times, I think.
So I want to get your feel on this. So what I was reading was basically breaking down the idea of what separates art from propaganda. And basically with art is essentially someone taking something unknown and attempting to explore it to find out what it means. Whereas propaganda is the reverse, in which we start out with, here's what we know, and now let's put it into a form of art. So we start with a conclusion and then we move on to art, whereas true art, great art, moves in the other direction. So for some reason, the Goldfinch started popping into my brain on this. Now, this is going to include spoilers because we've got to talk about some of the aspects of this. So if you haven't seen the Goldfinch and want to avoid the spoilers, this is your spoiler warning. So basically in the film, this young boy is at a museum looking at this famous painting of a goldfinch with his mother. When a bomb goes off in the theater, his mother is killed. In the chaos, he ends up taking this priceless piece of art. And his life goes on from there. It's a bit of a tragic life. He stays with the family for a while. Then he ends up, his real father comes back into his life. He's a bit of a deadbeat. He ends up working with his mentor on furniture. And there's lots of aspects of the film. I won't go through the whole thing, but this is what got me thinking. So much of his life. So he starts out, he hides away this piece of art. And in an aspect, that was the one true thing in his life. This is one real piece of art, which he connected with the real relationship with his mother. Everything else in his life from that point comes from the opposite aspect, where it's fake, it's false, it's fraudulent. You know, he has this family, but it isn't his family. Then his dad comes back and he doesn't actually have, like, his dad is kind of a fake dad, as it were, doesn't really care about him. His relationship with his friend, I think was they in Florida or they're in Arizona? I forget which.
I think they're near Las Vegas.
Vegas, yes, yeah. Vegas. Okay, that was a relationship where he thinks he has this close friend. His friend ends up stealing the artwork from him, but he doesn't even know. And he ends up working in his mentor's furniture shop, forging pieces of art, forging art furniture. It's like, as long as he had that priceless piece of art locked away, boxed away, the genuine thing hidden, kind of symbolizes that was the one true piece of art in his life, and everything else along the way was fraudulent, even to the point where his relationship with his fiance was fraudulent because she was in love with somebody else. So it seems like everything in his life, every aspect of his life was fake because he was hiding away anything that was genuine as a result of the death of his mom. And it's symbolized throughout the movie by his hiding this piece of art, the Goldfinch. And his mentor ends up yelling at him about two things: about him forging the pieces of furniture in his name, and about him hiding away this piece of art. And it always struck me that there should be a connection there. And I feel like I go back to that idea about art being genuine, true art being genuine, and the rest of it being fraudulent on those two things. He was both hiding away the piece of art that was genuine and spending his life basically developing forgeries. And that connects with his character. Am I explaining this in a way that makes any sense? Because I wrote it down differently. I'm trying not to read what I wrote down on this.
Yeah, I think I track with what you were saying, and it always struck me that when he takes this piece of art as a kid, I don't think he necessarily really understands the impact of what he's doing.
Yeah.
And I think that bleeds through into the rest of his life, where all these things happen to him, all these circumstances come upon him that are huge and make no sense and are frustrating and false, like you said, and fake. And it's really devastating. He gets taken away from family that probably loves him more than his own dad, who, is just there to, it turns out we find out, to basically use him to steal his identity and get money.
Yeah.
Is really the only reason that he comes back for him in the first place. And you see in that moment when he goes to open the painting again, and he hides it. He doesn't even look at it. And I think, like you said, he always has that feeling that no matter what else is going wrong in the world, there's always that touchstone he can come back to. He doesn't even have to look at it. He can just hold the thing wrapped up and know that things are going to be okay. And we see that in the movie a couple times. But then the shattering of that reality when he finally opens it up and sees that it's a textbook instead of a painting, kind of puts him at a place where he acts from that point like there's nothing left to live for, because that was the only thing that was true, the only art in his life, not propaganda. Then what is there to continue striving for or towards? And this movie is it's a punch to the gut.
Yeah.
Because I think we all want that feeling of there being this truth and this art in our lives, and not what somebody else has put upon us or told us is reality, and a reality that puts us in a place where we are minimalized and marginalized. And at the end of the movie, he's really at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I definitely see that connection there. And when you talk about that,
it's like when he comes finally, like the forgeries in his life are just building up and building up and building up until he reaches that crisis moment when he opens up the painting and finds that that too is a forgery because it's a book and not the actual painting. It's not until that moment till he's forced to confront the fact that everything in his life is fake. And you can just see the just desperation to get back something that was genuine. And it's not until he deals with that fact that he can come back to some semblance of reality and start to move forward in some way. He's just been stacking on forgeries and fake things on top of fake things. And I think that's represented by the fact that he has this hidden away painting. Yeah. So I don't know. It's fascinating to me because I think one of the things I was reading along this line about art was it was talking about that art is it's so devastating to us when it's done well that we have to kind of minimize it. We have to hide it. Like we can't actually look at it in its full force because it just hits us too hard. And I felt like that was really wrapped up well in that movie.
Yeah, I think that as an overarching, what is this movie trying to tell us, is a pretty good synopsis of where they're trying to go with the story.
Yeah.
And the thing is that we say this about this movie, and you pull this out of this movie, but virtually every movie has some impetus behind it, or some background story they're trying to tell you, or a value they're trying to espouse to you. That's what media is, and movies are not any different.
Yeah. And I think instinctively we instinctively have a grasp when something's coming at something from a genuine art perspective, as opposed to when something has an agenda where they're not exploring the art and they're not exploring it, but they're coming at you with an agenda. I think we instinctively kind of revolt from that, whether we know what we're doing about it or not. And so just thinking through this gives me another level of appreciation for the way that movie was developed. And
yeah, it straddles that line and makes you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because you know that there's something there.
And this was the thing when I saw it the first couple of times. It's like, I know there's more here. I know there's more to this story, but I haven't quite landed on where it is. So when I was thinking about this today, I'm like, I feel like I got to talk about this with Rob to see whether this makes any sense to him or not on the podcast. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So if you have not seen the Goldfinch, check it out if you can.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I'm using this as a therapy session to kind of get out what's going on. So, all right. So let's move on to something a little less meaty. We're going to talk about villains in the MCU. So IGN came out with this interesting article where they ranked the top 25 villains in the MCU. So we will link to that list so you can take a look at it. But we thought we'd talk about the list. It's interesting. So we're going to talk about a couple of things, our thoughts on the list in general. We're going to talk about our favorite and least favorite villains amongst that list. So Rob, which one do you want to start with? Do you want to start with our favorites, least favorites of the villains, or do we want to start about our thoughts on the list itself?
Let's go with our favorites, I guess.
Okay. So who were your favorites MCU villains? And by the way, this list does include some that are on the TV series. And since it's a movie podcast, we don't go there, but they're on the list. So
apparently I like underrated villains because, and it might have something to do with who the actors are. But one that stuck out to me as being very low, in my opinion, and one that I really like was Justin Hammer, which is played by Sam Rockwell.
Interesting.
In the Iron Man movies. And I think that I connect with him as a villain because he is a human being. He's not perfect. He makes mistakes. He lets his ego and his emotions at times overwhelm him, and that makes him fail in some of his efforts as a villain. But I thought that his character was just portrayed really well, especially in contrast to the character in Iron Man 2, the Russian villain guy whose name I'm not remembering right now. In contrast to that, he like that the Russian guy is this force of will and power and strength, and Justin Hammer is just kind of this, oh, it's okay, I'll take care of it, I'll get all this stuff ready for you and it'll be okay, and then the plans all fall apart. But I like that. I like seeing the reality of someone going through and not always succeeding, and not just having like this unlimited ability to always get it right, which some villains I think have sometimes.
Yeah.
Another one that I really like and has made an appearance on Captain America: The Falcon and the Winter Soldier TV show, but was also in other movies, Civil War, particularly Helmut Zemo,
Yes.
played by Daniel Bruhl, I think
Yeah.
might be my favorite.
I
And
agree.
he's listed
That's on my list.
as the ninth on this list, which I think is very low.
I agree.
Because his character is just written so well, with his family and friends dying in Sokovia, his desire to get revenge for that, but the way he seeks revenge is to completely manipulate and alter the mindsets of people, which is so much more dangerous, I think, than just going after someone and killing them, which some villains do. And I think that's why I like him, because he's so focused in on the psychological aspect of being the bad person. And in his mind, he's not the bad person. The Avengers are the bad people, and he believes it, and he acts out, and he carries out his actions all based on that ethos, and it's very clear that he is committed to it.
Yeah, I agree. He's on my list. Zemo's on my list because I think his was the most interesting, different, and realistic, I would say, of the villains for all those reasons you articulated. His warfare on them was significantly more mental, especially when you've got a team of superheroes with crazy powers. How do you attack them head on like everyone else was? He chose to go a different path, and he goes the mental side of it, and he finds the strains in the relationships, and he uses Bucky Barnes to manipulate them, which I thought it was just an excellent use of a villain. And his pressures lasted for a long while.
Mm-hmm.
And his was one of the most successful campaigns, I would say, against the Avengers.
Yeah, because when you attack the mind, it's a lot different than just hacking off an arm or killing someone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you have any other ones on your list of favorites?
Those were the two I had written down for that.
Okay. All right. I think another one for me on my list was Mysterio. I thought Mysterio was interesting too, along similar lines, because he poses as Spider-Man's friend. He poses as his mentor. He gets in there with him and then completely uses that against him. So I thought he was underrated as well. I thought that was well played. So Mysterio was the second one on my list. What do you got for least favorite?
I actually didn't scroll through the whole list, so I don't know if he's on the list. I'm assuming he must be, but Dormammu from Doctor Strange. I don't know if he's even on the list, but to me, he's the most confusing
Yes.
villain. Maybe that's why I don't like him as much, just because I don't get it, you know?
Yeah.
But as a whole, most of the villains have been pretty well written,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion, in the Marvel universe. There's not much you can nitpick at.
Yeah, there's not a ton that you can nitpick at. I think Ego from the second Guardians of the Galaxy, Peter Quill's father, I think I didn't like him as much. I didn't like the way they kind of the ending, the way they kind of wrap that up a little bit. So I think he would be on my list of ones that I was not particularly fond of. I also think I will go with another least favorite of mine was probably, they put on the Children of Thanos on there, which I wouldn't necessarily have considered them real villains. But yeah, they were weird looking. So yeah, they were not a favorite of mine. What are your thoughts on the list overall?
I thought it was pretty good. Like you said, some of the characters are from the TV shows, and I haven't actually seen. Is it Daredevil that Fisk and Purple Man are from? and I've heard that they're really good. Or I guess Pearl Man is that Jessica Jones?
That's Jessica. Yeah.
Yeah, but I haven't seen those shows, so I can't really. I don't feel like I can make an accurate claim on if they're too high or too low or in the right spot.
Yeah.
I don't think there's too much arguing about Thanos being number one because the entire 10 years of movies led up to that. So
I thought a couple of my thoughts on it was I thought Ronan was a little too low. I just thought he played such a big role early in the first Guardians of the Galaxy and as part of the original story. I thought he was too low. And I thought Ultron was also too low. I thought Ultron was a pretty darn good villain for the second Avengers movie. And to see him at number 14 surprised me, especially considering he is below Ego, which I thought was way overrated.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And Johann Schmidt, Red Skull, being number 8. Really? Red Skull at number 8? That surprised me because he's such a good actor. He's such a good actor. And I thought his villain was very, very clear and very good. So that surprised me that Red Skull was as low as he was. I also thought Killmonger was a little high. I mean, I thought he was a good villain, but I don't know that I would have put him at number 3.
Yeah, I think that can be argued.
Yeah. But overall, I think it's an interesting list. It's interesting to see all the villains kind of listed out in order. I think the most underrated, perhaps, is the Mandalorian or the Mandalorian. The Mandarin, because the Mandarin was.
This is the way.
Jeez. The Mandarin was such a cool twist. That was such a fun twist when that came out. He's just a dope who's being used. I thought that was cool. So I thought that was probably the most fun villain on the list. All right, so let's move on to the watch list. These are movies we watched over the past week, and we'll give you a synopsis on them and what we thought. So Rob, why don't you go first?
Well, I watched about 8,000 movies this week. I sent Brian a picture of, I think I've literally watched like 12 movies this week because I went to the theater for 2 on Wednesday. We had a friend over Friday and Saturday. We watched 2 movies each night with them. So I've got quite a wide variety to choose from. But I'm going to go with the first one is the Thomas Crown Affair, which I had not seen before, with Pierce Brosnan and Rene Russo, about businessman who is also an art thief. And it's very cleverly done, focused in on a few specific pieces of art, and he maneuvers and manipulates to get the one he wants specifically. And it's pretty fascinating how he does it. And the end game scene, the last 10 or 15 minutes of the movie, is really clever and probably one of the better shot and acted sequences like that I've seen in the movie. And I had not seen the movie before. So nice. I really enjoyed that. It was my friend Jen's recommendation that we watch that. And I've also been watching the James Bond movies starting at the beginning and going through again. So I started with Dr. No, which is the first one. We watched From Russia with Love, and we watched Goldfinger, and we're on Thunderball right now. So I'm going to go through and watch them all again in order because it's been, I think it was 2 summers ago, I think, when we did that the first time. So I'm looking forward to continuing that. Probably watch some more of Thunderball tonight and maybe start the next one.
Sweet. I like it. All right. I watched the first 2 of the sequel trilogy for Star Wars. I figured after we talked a week or 2 ago about J.J. Abrams' thoughts on the trilogy, I thought, it's been a while since I don't know that I've gone back and actually watched all 3 of them in a row. I've watched them individually in the theaters and then when they came out on video. I don't know if I've sat down and watched them all together. So I got through the first 2 this week, The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. And one of the things that struck me, I knew it at the time, it's been one of the criticisms, but the level to which they were pulling from the original trilogy, they really, really replicated a lot of the plots and a lot of the storylines, not only for The Force Awakens, but also for The Last Jedi, too. Particularly, it starts out with the First Order finding and attacking the rebellion base, which is precisely how the Empire Strikes Back started. There were so many similar sequences and similar things through those first two movies that were close to replicas of the originals. And that really doesn't do justice to the movies. I think they really could have done a better job on those aspects, because some of the things that were original I found quite interesting. In The Last Jedi, that whole unknown connection between Rey and between Kylo Ren was really interesting. I thought that was a nice twist. It was a good plot point. It was a good part of the story. And I think that really made for some interesting scenes, and some of the best scenes in there where it came out of that particular storyline in itself. The whole whiny, moody Luke, really, that still bothers me. I still think that was entirely unnecessary. But it did give you, whiny Luke did give you a great Yoda scene. So
Yes.
that was a fantastic Yoda scene, and I really, really enjoyed it. So if we had to get a half a movie of whiny Luke just to get that great Yoda scene, it might have been worth it.
My argument for whiny Luke will always be that even in the 80s movies, he was whiny a lot of the time.
He was.
So it's not really fair to me to expect him to grow up and to never have that problem again.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's they're not terrible movies, but they all have things that are just, there's a lot of things that prevent them from being great. I mean, The Last Jedi, that whole sequence of the two of them going off to that, alien gambling planet, that whole scene is just a disaster. Like, it's just horrible. It's just horrible, the whole thing. And it's useless. The whole thing is useless. So there's a number of things along those lines. I did enjoy the Luke mentally projecting himself into the final battle sequence. I thought that was a cool twist. I thought that was really well done. So there are some very good aspects of each of these movies, but there's just enough, and part of it's the repetitive nature of them that that gives you the feeling that they were certainly not as good as they could have been. So, you got anything else, Rob?
Not for that, no.
Okay. All right, let's move on to our recommendations. So for our recommendations for this week, we're going with movies with a great villain. Movies with a great villain. So, Rob, what do you got on the recommendation front?
I was thinking a little outside the box here, and we think of the Marvel movies and the well-established like headline villains as the main thing we look at when we talk about something like this. And I was thinking more an esoteric villain, or maybe not necessarily a specific person, maybe a group of people, maybe a thing. And it made me go back to some of M. Night's earlier movies. And I think that in each of The Village, Signs, and Unbreakable, you've got some pretty interesting and worthwhile villains in those movies.
Mm-hmm.
The Village, I'm not going to spoil what happens in the movie, but the villain is definitely not what you expect it to be, and completely destabilizes an entire community when it's figured out. In Unbreakable, the villain is just bad guys in general. I mean, Samuel L. Jackson is the main bad guy, but there are all kinds of other bad people he runs across, and it kind of makes you think about who out there, might be in that profile or have those kind of thoughts or be willing to go to those lengths to take the kind of actions that the bad people in the movie do. And with Signs, the villain is really unseen for a whole lot of the movie. And I think those kind of movies are particularly fascinating. Another one that I'm just thinking of now as I talk about it is the horror movie It Comes at Night, which is a very interesting horror movie because you never see the thing. You see the effects of what it's doing to people. You see a few dead bodies, but you never actually see it. So that is maybe almost scarier than actually seeing it, not being able to see it. So I like just having a wide variety and breadth of options when it comes to what a villain can be in a story. And I think those are some examples of different takes on it.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. Those they do have some really fascinating villains on those. So for me, I'm going to go with one that I will recommend. It's on HBO Max, and that's No Country for Old Men. This is a classic Javier Bardem villain where he plays just a complete psychopath. And there are just some amazing scenes with him. I think in particular, when he goes on this killing spree where he's just running around killing random people. And he goes into this convenience store and he's having this conversation in this convenience store with this unsuspecting guy. And he doesn't know, like, his life is literally on the line. And just the interaction there is so fantastic. It's so good. So that's the first one I will mention on that. And we're going to continue with the Javier Bardem theme and go with Skyfall. His character in Skyfall is an amazing foil for James Bond. And his acting just brings out the best in both Bardem, Skyfall, and Bond, I think. And that's one of the things that makes Skyfall work really, really well. So those are my recommendations.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting to that one in about 20 movies.
Yeah, you got a little ways for that one. All right. I think that's good for the show. You got anything else?
Seems like a good wrap.
All right. Well, that is the show, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to Film for Fans. Make sure you check out filmforfans.com. I'm going to be trying to get out my review of A Quiet Place Part 2 in the next day or two. So be looking on the website for that, as well as other content on filmforfans.com. Make sure you rate and subscribe to wherever you get your podcasts. And if you'd like to watch our smiling faces as we talk through the podcast, you can check out our YouTube channel. Make sure you leave us comments and tell your friends. Until next time, enjoy the movies.